So here's a story that I edited for Reason Magazine yesterday that really went viral on social media because it's outrageous, and I wanted to talk about it here on Rising a little bit. So this is the story of a mother in Waco, Texas, who has a really, really horrible experience that she had that I know a lot of parents have had over this. Giving your kids like even a little bit of independence, even a little bit of alone time. So she was driving back from a karate practice or something like that with her kids. And the 8-year-old, he was almost 9, was like really hyper at the moment. So they were half a mile from their home in suburban Waco, like very safe suburbs. She said, "Get out of the car, you're walking the rest of the way home." By the time she got home, the cops had picked him up because a neighbor saw this poor abandoned child or something. So the cops are like, "Did you know this is a crime, that you can't let your kid like walk home?" And she was like, "What? No, I didn't know that was a crime." So she was arrested and charged with child endangerment. So they closed, so CPS opened an investigation, Child Services. She, for 2 weeks, so they booked her, by the way. They took her to the station, she was booked, she was handcuffed, etc. Then there's the Child Services investigation. So her and her husband, they had to have their parents, their mothers, the grandmothers of the kids, had to alternate staying with them because the kids aren't allowed to be alone with them anymore. Because Texas has this great law that my colleague who wrote this story, Lenore Skenazy, she's a writer for us and she does a lot of activism on behalf of childhood independence. She helped, and she has a nonprofit that helps states write and pass these laws to make sure that it's not a crime to let your kid walk home, which is something we all did as kids, our parents and grandparents did. It's nice, normal tradition. The Child Services investigation closed after 2 weeks. So yes, this doesn't actually violate you haven't put the children in danger. But criminally, it still proceeded. And she had to plead guilty to, you can't risk going to trial ever. So she pled guilty. She had to do community service. And she had to do community service at a school, but on the weekends because she's a threat to children.
Oh my God.
And she's in, so it's fine. She didn't lose the kids. Didn't have to go to jail, but she's on like a list of like people who are threats to children. So she lost her job.
Oh my God.
She works at like a pediatric.
Oh my goodness.
So she can't work there anymore. So she's trying to hire a lawyer to get off this list of like threats to children. It's incredible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it is insane, but like not actually. It's like insofar it's pretty common.
It's very common. This was a white family, but low income and black families are harassed by Child Services routinely. My colleague Lenore has covered so many of those things.
Yeah, I mean, there were stories about people leaving their kid in the car for like 5 minutes when they run into the grocery store for a bag of flour or whatever. There have been other stories about kids walking home. And the problem is, there are oftentimes situations that I think a lot of us wouldn't necessarily find to be ideal, where we would love to be able to have child caregivers and things like that. But we live in a country that simultaneously wants to criminalize parents who are struggling to find care for their kids at the same time that there's nothing offered in the way of social supports and safety nets. And especially given how low minimum wage jobs pay, oftentimes people have to make the decision whether or not it's actually advantageous for them to pay for childcare at the same time that they have work. And so you have all of these ad hoc childcare situations that spring up, some of which are fine, some of which aren't necessarily in the best interest of the child. But the country, in my belief, can't go around criminalizing behavior when it isn't able to acknowledge that some behavior is only engaged in because there's a real need that isn't being met.
And it's important to recognize how unnatural it is, to this idea that children have to be supervised at all times. There's nothing historical about it. There's nothing, we didn't grow up like that. Our parents' generation didn't grow up like that. It was common you don't leave a 2-year-old to wander through the street, but teens and preteens, they go to their friend's house, they go play at the park, they take a bike to school, they wait, they might get home before their parents do. Like that is all natural and appropriate, given it's specific to each child and their emotional maturity and how trustworthy they are. But those are decisions that we rightfully leave to the parents We don't bring the state in it. And how are you making these families better off? Like this woman complained so during this period, she had to keep showing up for drug testing. So she had to leave her kids alone while she was doing that because she had to leave.
Yeah, and look, it's worth noting that there are some parallels here between this kind of state involvement and some of the other cases we've been talking about this week with respect to some of these anti-trans laws that would criminalize parents for making the choice to make gender-affirming care available to their kids. The broad category that is, you have to ask the question, how do you want the state policing this? What kind of inspections do you want the state doing? Do you want the state inspecting kids, having them strip searched, inspecting their genitals, coming into the household and being very invasive? So whatever you feel personally about what choice you would make as a parent, and it goes both ways. You can't be sitting here saying, I don't want teachers telling my kid about the 1619 project at the same time that you want the state going into other people's houses and telling them what they should do with their gender nonconforming child.
Absolutely, and I warn conservatives about that all the time. I try to explain that I think at the root of it, the state isn't really ideologically right-wing in the way that conservatives sometimes wish it would be, which means you're going to, what you want is some kind of enforcement of like non-CRT or non-whatever it is. But what you're going to get is these really ridiculous kind of investigations, harassment of parents. What about, Christian families being harassed or conservative families being harassed? If you introduce the state, you're actually opening yourself to a lot of kind of parenting that you probably approve of as a conservative being called into question. In the schools, I see ridiculous kinds of investigation, weapons investigations that are the fake gun, the famous truing your Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah, I forgot
the
about
zero
that.
All of those are people with teens who have fishing equipment or hunting rifles or something in the car. Leave them in the car, accidentally bring them onto school property. No one on earth thinks that's actually a threat or that they should get anything other than maybe like detention or something. Not a prosecution for bringing a deadly weapon onto a school. That's what happens under really militaristic kind of zero tolerance policies for all these things. So it's a very cautionary tale about where you want state power. And child services, I've seen so many of these cases, not a friend to families, whether conservative or progressive, whether white or black.
On the
they
campaign
are
trail
so
with
bad.
Bernie. People would come up to me and randomly bring up CPS as an issue when it wasn't really an issue for any political campaign. In any part, it's not a
national issue, it is a local issue.
But it came up almost everywhere I went, particularly in black communities on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
So
I would need like unequivocal evidence of or like witnessing of child abuse to dare call these people because they make things worse so often.
Well, great story, Robby. Well reported, well edited.
Thank you. More Rising right after this. Stay with us.